There's a specific kind of discomfort that comes with new neighbors. Not the loud ones, not the ones who park in your spot or let their dog ruin your yard. The quiet ones. The ones who smile just a little too easily. The ones who say something small, something offhand, something they couldn't possibly know, and then walk back inside like nothing happened. These are 4 real accounts from people whose new neighbors knew things they had no business knowing, and none of them have ever been able to explain how. The first story comes from a woman named Renee. She lived alone in a 2-bedroom house in a quiet suburb outside of Columbus, Ohio. The house was hers, paid off. She had lived there for 11 years without incident. Her neighbor on the left, an older couple named the Harts, had been there almost as long. Quiet, friendly, the kind of neighbors you wave to but never really talk to. Good neighbors. The house on her right sat empty for almost a year after the previous owners relocated. Then one morning in early spring, a moving truck appeared. Renee watched from her kitchen window the way anyone would. A couple, maybe late 30s, a woman with dark hair pulled back, a man who moved boxes quickly and without expression. They had a lot of furniture for a house that size. Most of it looked heavy. She brought them a small plant the second day, a gesture she had always believed in. The woman answered the door before Renee had finished knocking, like she had been standing just inside, waiting. She smiled and said her name was Deborah. Renee introduced herself, said she lived next door, said she was glad to finally have neighbors again. Deborah looked at the plant and said, "Oh, that's so thoughtful. You always do things like that, don't you?" Renee said thank you. Then she stopped. She had never met this woman before in her life. She told herself it was just a generic comment, a reading of her personality based on the gesture. People say things like that. It doesn't mean anything. She walked back home and put it out of her mind. 3 weeks later, Renee had a bad night. She didn't sleep well. She had gotten a message from her sister that was upsetting, and she had stayed up too late sitting in the kitchen with the lights low, just thinking. She finally went to bed around 2 in the morning. The next day, she was getting her mail. Deborah came out at the same moment, also checking her mailbox. They waved, made small talk about the weather, nothing unusual. Then Deborah said, almost gently, "You should really try to sleep better. You can tell when someone hasn't been sleeping." Renee nodded. She didn't say anything. She went inside. She stood in her hallway for a long moment. Her bedroom window faced the side of Deborah's house. It was a ground floor window. The blinds were always closed. But there was a gap, a small one, at the bottom, where the blinds didn't quite meet the sill. She had never thought about it before. It had always been fine. There was nothing out there but the wall of the neighboring house. The neighboring house that had been empty for almost a year, and now wasn't. She told herself she was overthinking it. People can tell when someone is tired. It shows on your face. It doesn't mean anything. A month after that, Renee's sister visited for a weekend. They had a quiet dinner, opened a bottle of wine, talked about family things. Her sister left Sunday afternoon. Monday morning, Deborah was in her front yard pulling weeds. She looked up when Renee came out. She said, "It's good that you two talked. You seemed lighter when she left." Renee drove to a hardware store that afternoon and bought blackout curtains for every window that faced the property line. She never spoke to Deborah again beyond a nod. She told me she still doesn't know what Deborah saw, or how she saw it, or how long she had been watching before Renee ever thought to cover the windows. And she said that's the part she comes back to, not what Deborah knew, but how long she had been collecting it. The second story is shorter, but it hasn't stopped bothering the man who told it to me. His name is Paul. He rented a corner unit in a small apartment building in Portland, Oregon, 3rd floor. He had lived there for 2.5 years when a new tenant moved into the unit directly below his. He didn't meet her right away. He heard her, the way you hear any new downstairs neighbor. The particular rhythm of someone settling into a space, furniture being moved, the pattern of footsteps at different times of day. After about a week, he passed her in the lobby. She was maybe his age, quiet. She introduced herself as Mara. They talked for less than 2 minutes, normal things. Had she found the building easy to navigate? Was the elevator reliable? Things you say to a new neighbor. She asked if he worked from home. He said most days, yes. She nodded and said, "I thought so." You're usually on calls in the morning. I can hear a little through the ceiling. He said that made sense. Old building. The floors carry sound. He thought nothing of it. 2 weeks later, he was having a hard stretch. Work was difficult. He was dealing with something personal he hadn't told anyone about. He had a habit, when he was stressed, of pacing back and forth in his living room, which ran directly above Mara's apartment. He ran into her in the lobby again. She asked how he was doing. He said fine. She looked at him and said, "You've been pacing more than usual. Hope everything's okay." He smiled and said, "Yeah, just busy." He went upstairs. He sat down. He thought about the fact that she had said more than usual, which meant she had been listening long enough to know what usual was. He tried to brush it off. Sound travels in old buildings. She's not doing anything wrong. She's just observant. But then he started noticing other things, small things. The way she always seemed to leave the building at the same time he did on mornings when his schedule changed. The way she once mentioned, in passing, that he must enjoy cooking because the smell was always so good. On a night when he had cooked something he had never made before. Something quiet and specific. Something that required knowing what he had made before in order to know that this was different. He started keeping a list, not obsessively, just noting things, dates and what she had said. In 3 months, he had 14 entries. He showed the list to a friend who told him he was reading too much into it. Maybe. But he moved out when his lease was up. And the week before he left, Mara stopped him in the lobby one more time. She said she was sorry to see him go. And then she said, "I hope wherever you end up, you sleep better." He had never told her he wasn't sleeping well. He hadn't told anyone. The third story is the one that gets under me the most. Not because of what happened, but because of the timing. A man named Greg had moved into a new house in Michigan with his wife and their young daughter. The move had been a long time coming. They had saved for years. The neighborhood was safe, the schools were good, and the house itself was everything they had wanted. The neighbors directly across the street were a couple named Frank and Diane. They introduced themselves the first weekend. Friendly people, brought a casserole dish, stayed for maybe 20 minutes and left without overstaying. Greg's wife liked them immediately. Greg liked them too. They didn't see them often after that initial meeting. A wave here, a brief conversation about lawn care, normal neighbor things. About 6 weeks in, Greg's daughter started having nightmares. This wasn't entirely new. She had gone through a phase of nightmares before, a year or two earlier, and the doctors had said it was developmental. Normal, kids go through it. She had gotten better, and then the move had seemingly brought it back. She was waking up at night, coming into their room, saying she was scared without being able to say why. Greg and his wife handled it the way you do. Extra bedtime routine, nightlight, leaving the door open. It was getting better, slowly. One afternoon, Greg was doing yard work. Frank came over from across the street to ask about borrowing a specific garden tool. They stood in the driveway talking, and Frank said in a completely casual way, "Is your daughter doing better?" Diane mentioned she thought she heard crying over here a few nights. Greg said yes, she'd been having some bad nights, kid stuff, getting better now. Frank nodded sympathetically and said his son had gone through the same thing when they moved to this house. Greg said that was reassuring to hear. He went back to raking, but after a moment, he stopped. His daughter's room faced the back of the house, not the front, not the street, the back. And her crying, when she had cried, had been inside the house, down the hall, in her room, with all the windows closed, at night. There was no way Diane had heard it from across the street. He thought about it for the rest of the afternoon. There was only one window that faced a direction Frank and Diane's property could see. It was Greg's bedroom window. And the sound of a child crying carries differently through a wall than it does through a window. You would have to be closer than across the street, much closer. He never asked Frank about it. He told me that for a long time he convinced himself there was an explanation he wasn't thinking of. Sound carries strangely sometimes. They might have been outside that night. There was nothing malicious about Frank and Diane. They were kind people. But he also told me something else. He said that a few months after that conversation, he was up late and noticed, for the first time, that there was a specific angle on the street from which you could see directly into the gap between his house and the one beside it, a gap that ran alongside his daughter's room. And there was a street light there, enough light to see by, if someone was standing there at the right time. He said he checked the gap the next morning. The grass was pressed flat in one spot, like something had been standing there. He told his wife they should get a fence. She said sure whenever he was ready. He had it installed the following month. And he never looked directly at Frank and Diane's house again if he could help it. Some things, he told me, you are better off not confirming. The fourth story is the one that I think about when I wake up in the middle of the night and the house is too quiet and something feels just slightly off without a reason. A woman named Elise had moved into a rented house in rural Virginia after the end of a long relationship. She needed space, she needed quiet, she needed somewhere no one knew her. The house was on a small road with only 3 other properties. Her nearest neighbor was an older man named Walter, who lived about a quarter-mile down the road in a house that was just barely visible through the trees. She met him once in the first week. He had walked over, introduced himself, said he had lived on that road for 30 years and that she was welcome to come by if she ever needed anything. He seemed like the kind of man who genuinely meant it, weathered but kind. He mentioned his wife had passed 2 years ago and that the road was quieter than it used to be. Elise thanked him and said she appreciated it. She didn't see him again for almost 3 weeks. During that time, she was doing what people do when they are trying to build a new life in a new place, unpacking slowly, learning the rhythms of the house, finding out which floorboards creaked and which windows caught the morning light at the right angle. She had one ritual she kept from her old life. She kept a journal. Every night before bed she wrote, not much, a page, sometimes less, what she had done that day, what she was feeling, what she was working through, private things, the kind of things you write when you know no one will ever read them. She kept the journal in her bedside drawer. She had not told anyone about it, not her sister, not any of her old friends who checked in occasionally. She had certainly not mentioned it to Walter. The second time she saw him was when she had driven to the end of the road and noticed him checking his mailbox. She stopped to say hello. They talked for a few minutes. He asked how she was settling in. She said well. She said the quiet was what she had needed. He nodded. He said quiet is healing. He said his wife used to say that. He paused. And then he said, slowly and without any particular weight, she used to write too. Every night. She said it helped her think. Elise said that was nice. She said she understood that. She drove home. She sat in her kitchen for a long time. She had not told him she wrote. She had not had her journal out at any visible time. She had not mentioned it to anyone. She told herself it was just coincidence, a generic comment. Many people keep journals. He hadn't said anything specific. But he had said too, she used to write too, as if he already knew that Elise wrote. She went to her bedside drawer that night and checked the journal. It was exactly where she had left it. Nothing seemed disturbed. Nothing seemed wrong. She opened it anyway, and she found something she cannot fully explain. Near the back of the journal, past the last page she had written on, there was a page that felt slightly different, like it had been turned more than once, like fingers had touched it that were not hers. The page was blank. She was sure of it. She was sure she had never written on it. But in the very upper left corner, so faint she almost missed it, there were 2 small letters. Not her handwriting. She didn't show anyone. She didn't take a photo. She tore the page out and put it in the trash. She packed most of her things that week and moved back to the city by the following month. She told people the isolation had been too much, that she missed having people around. She never told anyone about the 2 letters. She told me she doesn't know how the journal was accessed. The house was locked. She had the only key. Walter's property was a quarter-mile away through trees, and the road between them was a dead end. She said she has thought about it every day since. Not about who wrote it, but about what the letters meant. She said they were just initials, not hers. She didn't recognize them. But whoever wrote them had put them there like a signature, like someone wanted her to know they had been reading, and had been for a long time. 4 neighbors, 4 moments where something small was said, something that couldn't have been known. People always ask where the line is. When do you know something is wrong? When do you start taking the small things seriously? And I think the honest answer is that you usually don't, not right away. Because the first strange thing always sounds like coincidence, like you're reading into it, like you're the kind of person who makes something out of nothing. That's what they count on, the patience of it, the smallness of it, the way it accumulates so quietly that by the time you are sure something is wrong, they already know more about you than you know about them. Check your windows tonight, not just the ones facing the street, the ones on the sides, the ones you never think about. Sleep well.